Welcome back to the Single Mom Glow Up. If you listened to the last episode, you know things were tough. Today, we're picking up right where we left off, and I'm sharing how everything shifted, how I learned to thrive as a single mom and found my confidence again. So, without further ado, let's jump in. So, where I left off, I was talking about the end of my last relationship, or the last relationship before I really started learning how to put myself first, right? Um, and so that breakup hurt a lot. And what was the turning point for me was getting to a point of realizing, okay, I had a hand in this. I need to take responsibility for um, my actions and my choices in picking people who aren't a good match for me, picking guys who um, I like or I think that I like, but really I just like the attention or what it means to be with that person, and I completely gloss over other stuff, right? I need to figure out how to not do this, right? And so I started, first of all, I took some time, obviously not dating, but still connecting with people online. I made a Discord or I already had a Discord because my ex pulled me into his friend group, but I was on Discord and I joined some other servers and met some people and just had some um, really good connections that I then, I do this thing where I just like level up super fast. And so where I will connect with someone at a certain level, um, next thing I know, I've grown differently. I don't want to say up past or anything like that. I think that it's a different thing. It's not a better or worse in most cases. It's just different. Um, and so, I started to grow differently. And, I didn't stay on Discord that long. And then I started dating again. But the difference was I started dating for me. What I mean by dating for me is I started to date to learn my likes, dislikes, non-negotiables, negotiables, values, etc., and what I wanted, and to just, like have fun. Like I'm very much like a hold my hand, tell me I'm pretty kind of girly. And so that's what I did. Um, and I had a great time. The glow kept glowing. I had had locks in a bob at that point, right? They were at my tailbone, and then I cut them a bit during the pandemic, and then I cut them into a lob, and it was super cute. Oh my gosh. But then at one point, when was this? The beginning of 2021. I shaved my head basically. And it was so liberating and freeing, not just in a physical sense. I mean, I looked stunning. Um, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see in the thumbnail, I don't have hair. But it was also liberating in the sense of like, this hair that I was super attached to, I got rid of it, and I looked good before, but I looked so much better. And internally, that was also what was happening, right? I got rid of all this baggage, all this incorrect programming, all this self-hating programming, especially against single moms. And um, instead of feeling worse, I felt so much better. I felt so much lighter. And I was just glowing from the inside out. And the more that I learned about myself and what I liked and just poured into myself, really, and made content, something about making this kind of content, this kind of empowering content, just makes me go 10 times harder. I think it's my purpose, honestly. um, but something about doing that um, just it was like a what's it called, a snowball effect, right? And things weren't completely easy, right? I was still dealing with anxiety. I was living at home and all this stuff. And back then I had my qualms about living at home because it felt shameful. I felt like, I should be on my own. Like, I'm 20 something years old and I should be this and I should be that, just shooting all over myself. Um, and so, I still carried a lot of that, but then I also was I felt great at the same time. It was both. There was a duality there. And so what was another turning point, or like not a turning point, but like a test, I think, is when there was this one guy who I had a super soft spot for, who I was in a long distance on and off flirtationship with. It didn't turn into anything massive, but there were a lot of feelings involved. And so uh, he was in town one week for something, and we met up, chatted, had a good time, and then afterwards, he I just had enough of like the flirtationshipness, and I was like, look, I do this. I don't do it as much anymore, but I can get very black and white with stuff. I was like, look, we either go all in with this or we leave each other alone, because this middle ground is driving me absolutely bonkers and I just can't take it anymore. He was like, yeah, then let's just not, basically. And so we didn't. And in that moment, I chose myself, not just in walking away and not chasing, but in literally laying it out on the table and being like, look, this is what I want. You can either give it to me or I'm leaving, right? I didn't do stuff like that before. I didn't outright just say, like, hey, can you meet my needs? That's a scary and vulnerable thing to do, right? To put yourself out there and be like, hey, can you meet my needs? If you're not used to doing that, if you're used to being passive aggressive or, not asking, pretending you don't have needs, if you're used to all of that and then you turn around and say, hey, this is what I need, can you provide that? Scary, terrifying. And then to receive a rejection afterwards, oh, it hurt. It stung. I was crying. I cried a lot. Um, and after that, I was like, all right, well, it feels great to choose myself here. Yes, I don't regret my decision. And I need to take a break from dating, right? Because I was doing that dating for me thing and having a great time. I was having fun. Um, and that, so I took some time to myself, and right, or the plan was to take some time to myself. And, a couple days later, I was like, all right, I'm going to delete these apps. Um, And so I went to Hinge. I said apps, but really I was only on Hinge. So I went to Hinge and I was like, all right, I have 250 likes on here. I'm going to delete them so that when I get back on the app, whenever I get back on, I don't have 250 likes to go through, and more than half of them aren't even on the app anymore. And it's just, I just want it to be clean and clear when I come back. Mind you, I had Hinge Premium at the time, uh, because let's just say I had a hookup who, uh, it, when I say hookup, I don't mean in like the dating sense. I mean a friend of a friend hooked me up with Premium Hinge for the free. Anyway, so I could go through all the likes and just like delete them all. And so I'm going through before I just blindly delete them all. And I see this one guy, and he was just so handsome and like so my type. And so I just check out his profile. I'm like, okay, I guess I can look a little bit. And so I looked, and in his profile, he mentioned something so like niche that I was like, oh my gosh, there's no way. Right. And it was like, what is your most adventurous, what's the most adventurous thing you did? And it was that he did a Tarzan swing in Costa Rica. And I was like, there's no way he did the same Tarzan swing that I did in Costa Rica. So I had to find out. And so I responded to that. And come to find out, he did do the same Tarzan swing in Costa Rica and a bunch of other things. It was just 10 years apart, that we were both there. And he was there way longer than I was. I was there for like 13 days. He was there for like 13 months. Um, Not exactly, that's an estimation. Anyway, so we started chatting on that level, and then things just like blossomed, and he started applying a whole lot of pressure, and he's just this really good guy, and um, things moved really fast. This is something that is not necessarily something that I recommend doing for most people unless you feel highly connected with your intuition and you've done a lot of work on yourself. I'm really good at reading people. And so, if you are not good at reading people, I don't recommend doing this. If you're not connected to your intuition, I don't recommend doing this. Like, my intuition snatches me up, and I hear it before it snatches me up. Don't get me wrong, but like in certain instances, it is super loud, especially when it comes to other people. I have issues with my intuition, not issues, but it's harder for me to hear my intuition when the only person impacted is myself. But when it comes to the impact on, especially my kids, my intuition is loud and clear all the time, just flawless. Um, and so, with that, I just wanted to give that disclaimer. But we ended up moving in together, and he was such a great. He still is. He's great with the kids, and it's just a really good guy. He was perfect. I had a list, right? I always say dating without a list is like going to Target without a list. Like, you go to Target without a list, you come out with a whole bunch of stuff you don't need and don't really want, and you wasted your time and energy getting it, right? Not always. Sometimes you find gems in Target and it's a good thing, but most of the time that's not the case. And same thing with dating. You go into dating without a list and you end up just all over the place, really, right? But if you have a list, and I'm not talking about a list of physical features, those things, I mean, they matter a bit if they matter for you. Some people like me, I'm like demisexual, so like looks matter to an extent, but they also don't. Um, but anyway, um, that's not the main point of the list. The main point is, those things that you learn as you date for you. So, how do you like to be treated? How do you like to feel? What do you like in a person? What kind of friendship do you want to build with your partner? What kind of romantic relationship? What type of the sexual relationship? Like, do you even want to have a sexual relationship? Are you asexual? Like, these things that you may not even know about yourself, right? Especially if you're like me and dedicated the first 7 years of your adult life to some scrub, right? Like, loyally devoted to some scrub, right? You don't know these things about yourself. All you know is how to be in a relationship with that one person. So you're figuring all this stuff out. So you date for you, right? And so, having figured all that stuff out, I had my list, and he checked off everything on that list, everything. And so I just went with it. I just went with the flow, right? Keeping my intuition on, listening, staying tuned in. And it was beautiful. And really, the only reason it ended wasn't for lack of love. In fact, I think it lasted longer because of the love. There was so much external, like, life things happening that kind of like A, put internal pressure on each of us, and B, pulled us apart. Like, by the end of the relationship, we didn't have anything left to give to the relationship. It just ended that way. No one was, there was no like, there's nothing to be angry at. There was some anger, but it was like not pointed at each other because it's like neither of us did anything wrong. It just was a sucky situation. And each of us had to choose ourselves. And, we're both doing a lot better. I want to say by the end of the relationship, we both look like sunken. I look at the pictures and I'm like, oh my gosh, we look like dead and drained and all of these terrible things. But I saw him last week when he brought some food for the puppy. And I look so much better. He looks so much better. And I'm just like, oh, thank goodness. Like, more than anything, I care about him as a person, right? If we can't be together, I still want him to live an amazing, wonderful life because he deserves to live an amazing, wonderful life. And same for me. And so I say all that to say that it worked and that the choosing myself had an immediate return of, and it doesn't always happen immediately. So I want to set that expectation, but it had an immediate return of aligning me with someone who is good for me or was good for me at the time, right? And then things fell apart for other reasons. I think God has other plans for me, right? But by no means do I feel like that relationship was a failure or shouldn't have happened or anything. I'm grateful for it. One, two, I think it did need to happen. I think it was supposed to happen, and I see it as a gift. Like, I see him as a gift and all of that stuff. And sure, it ended, but like, I regret nothing. And I don't think he does either. He said he didn't, and I believe him. Um, so I wanted to say that. Um, and so with that, right, I didn't just, this is why I think God has different plans for me. It's like in that moment, after I chose myself, God was kind of like, all right, here, I'm going to give you everything that you want, right? Here's the relationship that you want. You're going to move out. You're going to have the job that you want. And so I ended up working this amazing job as a college counselor. And like as a therapist, it's hard to find a job that pays well, that you don't have a lot of client facing hours, and that you have good benefits, and that the workplace isn't toxic, right? Usually it's a toss up between those. And I found a job that had all the benefits, like coworkers, amazing, supervisor, amazing, pay, amazing, benefits, crazy good. Like, it was such a great place to work. And I couldn't work there. Like, I started facing, and I'll get into this in another episode, but I learned that I was autistic. So I was facing burnout. I was facing autistic burnout. Like, I can't do the 8 to 5 thing. And if this seems a little bit choppy, my apologies. I had to pause before I just did this next section to go get my kids from the school bus, and my son is a bit having a moment. So, um, yes, autistic burnout. So I'll talk about that in another episode. Otherwise, this one's going to be ages. And so that happened, and my ex was going through his own stuff at the time with his job, and he's been on like this redemption arc, and it's just been a really tough time for him. And For the astrology girlies, I'm a Libra, he's an Aries. And so if, you've been following the cardinal sign thing, then, it tracks. But um, yeah, we were just going through, like I said, external stuff. But then we both ended up I came back here home to live with my parents because I had to leave the job. And it was that felt like a breakup too. I was like crying, I was sobbing on the daily because I was so upset in admitting that I had to leave such a great job. And, kind of the same thing happened with the relationship. I was upset admitting that like the relationship was over too. I didn't want it to be over, but it was. And he didn't want it to be over, but it was. Same thing with my supervisor. She's like, I don't want you to leave, but I don't want you to stay if this is how the job is making you feel. And I was like, you're making so much sense, but like, I hate that. She's like, I hate it too. So, that happened. And then we had to move out of our, townhouse, and he's with family and I'm with family. Um, and it's like, I'm back at square one, no job, single mom living at home with my parents. Um, and what was it? No job, no partner, just me and the kids, right? And my family. Um, and at first it was like a major, it felt like a major blow. Like, oh my gosh, here I am back at square one. I failed, right? But it wasn't. It's not a failure. Like I'm one so much better off. Not to say that like that's not aimed at my ex. That's just aimed at the situation as a whole. Like being autistic and trying to do neurotypical levels of living was killing me. Like some days I went to work and I felt like my legs, I just felt like my legs were going to collapse underneath me and I was just going to fall and my legs just weren't going to work anymore. That's what I felt like was going to happen if I kept going. Um, which sounds wild, but that does happen to people. Um, and I didn't feel that strongly about the relationship, thankfully, because, you know, there was a lot of good there. It was a lot of, anyway, I felt like I was back at square one, but then I realized it was more like that episode of SpongeBob with the magic conch. And, you know, SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward get flung into the middle of a forest and all they have is a magic conch, right? And I felt like that. I was just, okay, all right, everything fell apart. I'm stuck here um, with the magic conch. Let me pull the thing and see what it says. And, you know, magic conch in my world is God. So I'm like, what am I supposed to do here? And the way that the answer was nothing, I was like, okay, all right, you know what? Let's do it your way, God, because I feel like those last 2 years, God handed me everything. He was like, here's everything you think you want. And I was like, yay, I did it. All right. But then I realized everything that I thought I wanted was so contrary to who I am. Right. And I never would have learned that lesson had I not been handed everything I wanted. Right. Because what I was doing was looking at everything else and being like, okay, well, if only I had this, if only I had the perfect counseling job, if only I had the perfect partner, then life would be great. Right. And it was. But God showed me that what I thought was my purpose is not my purpose. And so I'm not 100% sure what my purpose is. Right? I'm still figuring that out, but I'm taking the little guides. I'm taking the little I sat there and I did nothing and I'm still some days doing nothing. Kind of. Um but I'm taking it step by step now instead of just, okay, well, you know, I studied to be this, so this is what I'm going to do, and had this big plan. I don't have a big plan. I have like day to day plans, like this podcast, right? This all started with a Threads post. And I was like, I wonder if anyone would even be interested in being interviewed. And so what did I do? I posted on Threads and it blew up, and a bunch of y'all responded and we're like, hey, I want to be interviewed. I'm like, heck yeah. So I had 20 something people sign up, and I've got a bunch of interviews lined up for you to listen to now. So that kind of thing, right? Going with the flow. And like I said, I'm not a flow goer, I'm a planner, but I have become a flow goer because God took everything away. He's like, all right, now that you've had what you wanted and you realize that it's not what you're supposed to be doing in this life, are you ready to listen? I'm ready to listen. All right. So that's my journey. And so I say all that, but like I want to emphasize that that wasn't a failure. I think God also showed me through that it does work. Like choosing yourself does work. It works. You know, God's plan works more, but like it does work. I wouldn't have gotten to that point had I not learned to choose myself. So that, let me just double check my, yeah. Yeah. So lately, what I've been doing is, you know, having my back, um, doing a lot of self check ins. I actually have a self care checklist. I I sometimes will refer to it. I don't necessarily need to anymore because it's a lot of it has become habit. But I have provided it. So if that's something that you're interested in, I can definitely leave my link to that in the description. I have all kinds of resources for single moms. I've got a solo mom planner. It's got a custody schedule. It's got meal planning in the weekly template, not on some weird random page. And it's got financial planning sections. I've got a dating confidence guide that literally walks you through everything that I did to get to a point to be able to choose myself. It's called dating confidence, but you don't have to use it before you're dating or to boost your dating confidence. It's just good for boosting your confidence and glowing up in general. It deals with stuff specific to moms. Um, Not all of it's specific to moms, but it has stuff that's also specific to moms. And it's a workbook. You just walk yourself through it and you do the activities and you do the reflection, and you are well on your way to healing that void. That void that I talked about. I think I talked about it I talked about it in this episode too, but the first episode. And just being more confident in who you are as a person and feeling more whole. That's why I made that. And then I've got a dating Bible that just talks about all the things I've learned as a single mom dating. And then I've got a dating profile creation guide because the rules are a little bit different if you have kids. And they don't have to be different, but they are a little bit different. And yeah, so feel free to check those out. And I'm going to end things here. Otherwise, I'm going to go over. Last point, last thing, last reminder. Please, please, please choose yourself always. Always. You cannot pour from an empty cup. If you choose yourself, then you build yourself into someone that has the capacity for your kids, that can give even more to your kids. Instead of being in survival mode, you go from surviving to thriving. Oh, that's the piece that I wanted to address too. I created this space not just for single moms in general. I mean, you're all welcome here, but I created this space specifically for other single moms, whether you're neurodivergent or sensitive or whatever, who, like me, cannot subscribe to that um, hustle culture, right? For some single moms, y'all thrive in that, right? I cannot. Like, that tears me down. That makes me a terrible mother. It makes me a shell of a person, and I just can't. And so now I'm on this journey to build a life where I can still be the soft girly that I am and still be a single mom, still show up for my kids, still reach a level of independence. But like, I also very much love my support system and will not cling, but like hold on to my support system. I'm not going to let go of that just for the sake of saying, oh, I do this on my own or I can do this on my own, right? Like, to me, that's not a badge of honor. It's a show of strength, don't get me wrong, but to me that's not a badge of honor that you're doing it on your own. That's just a show of the failure of society to support its mothers, right? Like, it takes a village. That is one of the truest idioms, the truest statements, the truest expressions that I think there is about parenting. Like, it takes a village. And if you're doing it without a village, don't get me wrong, you're amazing, you're strong, your independence is unmatched, right? But that takes a toll. And for me especially, it takes a major toll. I don't care to do that. I cannot do that. I refuse to do that. And so if you resonate with that, my space is for you, especially because you're allowed to be soft, you're allowed to need support, you're allowed to want support as a mom, period. If anyone questions that, they can go be by themselves with their kids, right? Like, you go do that. They can mind their business and you can mind yours, right? Like, at the end of the day, you have to do what's best for you so that you can do what's best for your kids. And if what's best for you is to live the soft girl life and create a life that you can live the soft girl life as a single mom, do it. Like, why not? You know? All right. So thank you so much. That was a bit of a tangent. I meant to go there sooner, but I didn't want to end this saga of, my story without mentioning that. So thank you so much for tuning in once again. This episode was all about transformation, rediscovery, and, the soft girl life. And about realizing that even in the hardest moments, we have the power to rebuild. And even in our rebuilding, if that gets knocked down, you have the power to rebuild again. And so I hope my journey inspires you to start thinking about your own glow up. And remember, whether you're just starting out or you're deep in your transformation, you've got this. Okay? Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review if today's episode resonated with you, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye bye. Mwah.